In today's class, we are going to take up two romantic poets and their most or one of the most important poems in the romantic period and even in the lives of these two great poets. So the first one we are going to discuss is Ode to West Wind. So who had written this Ode to West Wind? Can anybody tell me quickly?
Shelley, sir. Bysshe Shelley.
Right. Percy Bysshe Shelley. He is a romantic poet and he is known as Mad Shelley as a boy in school. So remember this one. Who is called Mad Shelley, or which romantic poet is called insane or mad during school days? He is Percy Bysshe Shelley. He was known as Mad Shelley as a boy in school. He had written The Necessity of Atheism, revolt against this kind of ideal worship and all those things, and with a T.J. Hogue, and it was published in 1811 when he was in Oxford University, and he was expelled from the university because of the publication of this, The Necessity of Atheism. What is atheism, Diksha?
Atheism.
Non-believer of God, correct?
Non-believer, yes sir. Atheist, yes sir, yes sir.
So he was expelled or removed from the Oxford University due to the publication of The Necessity of Atheism. He had written Queen Mab, a philosophical poem, in 1813, and he had written Ozymandias, then Alastor or the Spirit of Solitude, Hymn to Intellectual Beauty, Revolt of Islam, Ode to West Wind, which we are going to discuss today in detail, and To a Skylark, and Prometheus Unbound. He had written a pastoral elegy, Adonis, and to commemorate the death of Keats. And he had written a tragedy, The Cenci. It has 5 acts. And then he had written The Mask of Anarchy, published in 1832. And he had written, not published, unfinished, The Triumph of Life in 1824. So he was drowned in a river. So that's why he could not complete his writings. Now a little information about this poet. I'll read out from the book. Percy Bysshe Shelley was born on 4th August 1792. He came of an old family of Sussex squires who were Whigs in their politics. He grew up with an addiction to liberty in the abstract and with no special aversion to the revolution. And he completed his schooling in Brentford and he went to Oxford University. In Oxford University, he published a pamphlet in 1811 entitled The Necessity of Atheism and was expelled from the university. And then he went to London and lived in lodgings, and then he fell in love with Harriet Westbrook, daughter of a retired innkeeper. And then they both eloped, but after 2 years of wandering life, they lost interest over each other. And this gentleman, Shelley, in July 1814, fled to the continent with Mary Godwin. So he had fallen in love with one more lady, Mary Godwin, and daughter of William Godwin, the celebrated author of Political Justice. So William Godwin was the author of Political Justice, and when they eloped, this Percy Bysshe Shelley, P.B. Shelley and Mary Godwin, his earlier wife or his first wife, Harriet, committed suicide, and this affected him very, very bad. But still, after 3 weeks of her death, he married to Mary Godwin. And then he had written so many poems in the beginning, but it was not, those were not very successful. And then he had written Queen Mab, first important poem which gave him some reputation, recognition. Then he had written Alastor. He completed Rosalind and Helen in 1818. Then he had written some famous poems, Ode to West Wind, Epipsychidion, Adonis, and all these things. And he had written a prose work also, A Defense of Poetry. And then Shelley was drowned together with his friend Williams. Remember the name? His friend Williams were also sailing on the same boat from Leghorn to Spezia, Leghorn, Leghorn to Spezia on 8th July 1882. And his body was cast ashore 10 days later near Villarejo. He had a volume of Keats in one pocket and a volume of Sophocles in other. So the question may come, at the time of death, Percy Bysshe Shelley was carrying whose books? It was John Keats, volume of John Keats in one pocket, and Sophocles, volume of Sophocles in other. His body was cremated and his ashes were buried in the Protestant cemetery at Rome. Now, when we come to this poem, Ode to West Wind, the poet in this ode glorifies nature. He personifies the wind and assigns it human parts. It destroys everything in the autumn season. In literature, poet and writer use the autumn season to express themes of despair. So you remember this one? When poets use winters, poets and writers use autumn season to express themes of despair. Shelly also does the same. In this poem, he creates a melancholic atmosphere for which he uses the natural object west wind. The poem contains 5 stanzas, but the subject matter of the poem remains the same in all the stanzas. Now let us come to the technical details of the poem. It has 5 stanzas, and each stanza is considered to be a sonnet because it has 14 lines each. Each stanza is a sonnet of Shakespearean type, and the Tezra rima is being used by Shelly. It is ABA, BCB, CDC, DED and EE, and it consists of 3 quatrains followed by a couplet, and ode regarded as a small sonnet sequence. And now remember the information in examination point of view. There are 5 stanzas, so each stanza stands for something or resembles or symbolizes something in the poem. The first stanza is about land. When west wind came, how the land got affected by the entry or the coming of the west wind. And the west wind in the second stanza affects the air, on air. And in the third stanza, the west wind when it flows over the water, on water. And the fourth stanza is a link between poet and west wind. In the fourth stanza, the poet compares himself with the west wind. And in the fifth stanza, he completes his prophecy. That means what he is going to express or expect about the future. So all these 5 stanzas have this kind of thing. They may give you a question. What is first stanza about the west wind? So west wind stands or comes on the land in the first stanza, then it is in the air, third one is on water, fourth one is the link between poet and the west wind, and the fifth stanza is about the prophecy of the William Percy Shelley. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? The coming of the golden age. And it was written in 1819 but published in 1820 along with Prometheus Unbound, a musical drama. So Prometheus Unbound is a musical drama, and this ode to west wind, is also known as matchless ode in English literature. Now let us go to the poem. I have the text, I have the notes with me, so I will also read slowly, I will also explain that one. But I used to teach this poem for many years when I was working in a degree college, in a private degree college. So there is not an issue to explain this without even looking into the material. But for our convenience, for our practice, there are 4 students here. So each one will read one and one will get the 2 stanzas. So Goshi.
Hi, sir.
Now, before I begin this poem, the background of the poem we need to understand. When Percy Shelley was in despair, depression, when he was problems in his life, when he was not happy, and when he had so many problems in his life, this poem he had written. So, in this poem, he wanted to find some kind of a solution for his problems. All these romantic poets were super sensitive, so they wanted to come out of these problems, they wanted to come out of the agony or trauma created in their life. So he had written this poem and he wanted the west wind to give him the power to come out of the problem. So now let us see how the west wind is being compared or described by the poet in the first 3 stanzas, how powerful he had portrayed, picturized west wind in the first 3 stanzas, and in the 4th stanza he wanted to link his life with the west wind, or he wanted to turn like a west wind, and then in the 5th stanza he believes that whatever problems he has in his life, in future all those problems will be completely vanished. So now let us begin the first stanza. Goji, please start reading the first stanza.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves flit or trifle like ghosts from an enchanted thing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence striken multitudes, O thou who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine other sisters of the strings shall blow her clarion over the dreaming earth, and fill driving sweet birds like flocks to feed in air, with living hues and ardours plain and hill, wild spirit which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, O hear.
Right. So he starts the poem with "O wild wind, O wild west wind." So what type of figure of speech he used here, Goji? Addressing.
Apostrophe. Apostrophe.
Okay, not personification.
Personification.
Personification also, sir.
What is personification?
Personal attribute are given to the non-living object.
Right. What is apostrophe?
Apostrophe is an address to something.
Right. Now, in the first stanza or in the first part of the poem, you can see he is addressing, that means he is talking directly to the west wind, like a human being, like we talk to each other. In the same way, he has addressed the west wind. Oh, wild west wind. So, if west wind is not like a normal human being or a mild human being, it's a very wild. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being. So it is the breath or it is the soul of the autumn season. Thou, from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. So we cannot see the presence of the west wind, but we can see when the west wind arrives, how these leaves of the trees and the fallen leaves, how they were driven away from that place like the ghost from an enchanter fleeing. That means the person who knows about this black magic and these people know, they will chant something and they will make the ghost to move away from the place. So in the same way, the arrival of the west wind made these dead leaves to driven from the place. Yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence stricken multitudes. All these leaves are compared with the black, pale, yellow colors represents the problems, miseries, troubles, trauma in the life. And these are pestilence stricken multitudes. There are so many diseases. O thou whose chariotest to their dark wintry bed, the winged seats where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow. And it not only does the thing, what it does is when it comes, it takes the entire pestilence stricken leaves and all those things to remove the place, and chariotest to their dark wintry bed, the winged seats, that means the seats are also buried inside the earth for so many days, where they lie cold and low, almost all dead, like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure green sister, who is the green sister, the spring shall blow her clarion over the dreaming earth and fill, driving sweet birds like flocks to the feeding air, with living hues and orders plain and hill. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, here, oh here. In the beginning, you can see the west wind acted as a destroyer, but you can also observe here the west wind acted as a preserver, preserved the seeds for the future generation. So now, as I told you already, this poem begins, the background of the poem is, Shelly was depressed at this time, wrote the poem in an attempt to overcome the depression by remembering the process of regeneration in nature. His son William had died in June. Early in October, Shelley read an issue of the Quarterly which contained a violent and prejudiced criticism of his poem, The Revolt of Islam. He was charged with imitating Wordsworth. So he was particularly pained by the assertion that, like the Egyptians, so this was the background of the poem. He was depressed and he wanted to come out of that state of mind, and he expressed his feelings and he wanted to be like west wind. Right now, let me also read the first stanza summary here. If I had missed anything, you can understand. In the stanza 1, the poet addresses the wild west wind, which symbolizes for him the very spirit of autumn season. The dried and withered leaves are driven before it with incredible force, like ghosts fleeing from an enchanter. The west wind, however, is as much a preserver as a destroyer. It acts as a chariot to the winged seeds and takes them to their dark wintry bed. When spring comes, gentle Jaipher will waken these seeds to life. Flowers will then spring up everywhere. So now you can understand this west wind is not only a destroyer, it is also a preserver. Now this, both the powers of destruction, causing destruction, and giving life, is actually the qualities of the supernatural or almighty or the God. So west wind is also have the same kind of power which the God or the almighty has. So you can understand Percy Bysshe Shelley found this power in the nature, almost all equal to the power of the almighty or God. Let us go to the second stanza. Diksha. One second. First stanza is about the land. When west wind arrived on land, how it did, what it did on land was the main part of the first stanza. Diksha, second stanza, please read.
Okay, sir. Thou on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed, shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean. Angels of rain and lightning there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce maned, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height. The locks of the approaching storm, thou dirge of the dying year, to which this closing night will be the dome of a vast
Sepulchre.
Vaulted with all thy congregated might of vapors from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst. Oh, here.
Right. Now in the second stanza, poet Shelly explains the power of west wind when it passes through water. Thou on whose stream mid this it's on air, not water, on air. Thou on whose stream mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed. When it passes through the air, the clouds or the sky, with the loose clouds, it gets commotion. That means the entire sky or the clouds will be shattered like the dead leaves the west wind had removed from the earth. So the same way, when the west wind arrives on air, mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed. Shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean, angels of rain and lightning. So these are very, very powerful things, but still the west wind made these things, are naturally powerful things, made them to commotion. That means to get fear about the arrival of the west wind. They are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce minute, like some kind of a magician, when she was sitting, her hair was uplifted and it was tangled, and that kind of thing was explained here by P.B. Shelly, and he was comparing the rain, lightning and all these things like the hair of a fierce minute. Even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height, the locks of the approaching storm. So the entire sky becomes so confusing because the west wind was so powerful to shatter and to create a kind of a great mess in the air. Though dirge of the dying year, it comes like and singing a song to the dying year, end of the year, to which this closing night will be the doom of a vast sepulchre, vaulted with all thy congregated might of vapors. So it will create a doom, it will create a grave for the entire season. It is going to end that one. From whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst, oh here. So here you can see the power of west wind on sky or in air, and the entire sky or air got trembled with fear when the arrival of the west wind. So in the previous stanza we understood the power of west wind on earth, and in this stanza we could understand the power of west wind in the sky. The clouds also feel the might and the energy of the west wind. They seem like leaves on the tangled boughs of the gigantic tree in the sky, and they are of the heaven and the ocean. These messengers of rain and lightning are shaken by the wind, driven into confused masses, and fall to the earth as rain. The strange disarray of clouds from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height appears to the poet like the unkept curls on the head of some fierce minute. The west wind seems to sing the dirge of the dying year, to which the closing night will be the doom of a vast sepulchre, vaulted over by the clouds from which will burst black rain, fire and hail. So this west wind was so powerful, even it can shake or shook the entire air or this one. And now I'm trying to give you that meaning for the word sepulcher, correct? Where is that one? Can you tell me where is that one? It comes in the last, will be the doom of a vast sepulcher. I'm just finding. Once I find, I'll tell you. The whole world will be like a tomb to the dying ear, and closing night is like the arched roof of the tomb. It is like the arched roof of the tomb, and that is called sepulcher. Right? Right, fine. And then, let me explain. The clouds also feel the might and the energy of the west wind. So when west wind entered through the air also got terrorized, and the west wind can control or overpower even the power of the air. Now what we try to understand is, in the first stanza we have seen the power of west wind over water. Second stanza we have seen the power of the west wind in air. Now let us go to the third stanza. Preeti. Preeti, are you there? Preeti? Diksha, am I audible?
Sir, audible, sir. You audible, sir.
Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
What happened to Preeti?
No idea, sir.
Preeti ji, are you there? Right, fine.
No, sir. Is I audible?
Yes, audible, Preeti. Start reading third stanza, Preeti.
Thou who didn't waken from his summer dreams, the blue Mediterranean, where he lay, lulled by the cool of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle of, what's that, sir?
Bias Bay.
Bias Bay, and saw in sleep old places and towers. Palaces and towers, quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers, so sweet, the sense faint, picturing them, thou for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which were the sapless foliage of the ocean know the voice and suddenly grow grey with fear and tremble and despoil themselves, O here.
Right. Now, if you see this two stanzas previous, at the end of the entire every stanza, he is asking west wind to hear him, O here. Second stanza ends with O here. Third stanza also ends with O here. So in the first stanza, poet explains or feels the power of west wind over land, and in the second stanza, the poet felt the power of west wind on air, and in third stanza, he is explaining how powerful west wind even to break this Atlantic Ocean. Thou who didn't waken up his summer dreams, the blue Mediterranean. So the blue Mediterranean Sea was sleeping so happily without any kind of problem, because Mediterranean Sea is considered to be one of the calmest seas, where he lay lulled by the coil of the crystalline streams beside a pumice isle in a Bias Bay. So now what happened, there is some kind of a distant tower is there. In that tower, somebody like, a fairy queen or a beautiful princess was sleeping, and she was dreaming about so many great things. So Mediterranean Sea was also happily sleeping and dreaming beautiful things, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers, so sweet the sense faints picturing them. Thou for whose path the Atlantic level powers cleave themselves into chasms. So when this Mediterranean Sea, when the west wind passes through the Mediterranean Sea, the entire Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean felt tremors or got trembled with fear, because what happened, the entire vegetation under the ocean got trembled. Though for whose path the Atlantic level powers cleave themselves into chasms, it divided and it separated to allow the west wind to pass through the water, while far below, while the west wind was passing through the water or above the water, while far below the sea blooms and oozy woods, which were the sapless foliage of the ocean, know thy voice. Even under beneath of the ocean or at the land of under the ocean, the vegetation which was there heard about the voice of the west wind, and suddenly grow grey with fear and tremble and despoil themselves. They were also shaken by the arrival of the west wind or passage of the west wind through the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if you understand the first stanza, the west wind power to even overpower the power of land. Second one, it showed the power of west wind on air, and third one, it showed the power on water. Now, these three are the natural elements, are the nature's greatest forces: land, air, and water. So even this west wind has control, or it can make terrorize these natural powerful elements. So now Percy Shelley explained, or he wanted to talk to west wind, and he had spoken to west wind. He told west wind how powerful the west wind is on land and water and on air. Now he wants to be like west wind. Now he compares himself with the west wind in the coming stanza. But let me read out. If I had missed anything from this part, I'll explain. The west wind wakes up the Mediterranean from his summer dreams. It had been sleeping, lulled by the gentle murmur of crystalline streams, and dreaming sweetly of the palaces and towns overgrown with moss and reflected in its own placid waters. The cloying sweetness of these visions make the sense faint, picturing them. Even the waters of the Atlantic are cloven into chasms when the west wind sweeps furiously over them. The vegetation at the bottom of the sea fears the voice of the west wind, trembles and denudes itself of all its leaves. Now, what I can tell you here is, Shelley compared the west wind with the Almighty. Are the powerful things in this world can be controlled by the most powerful, and we consider that as the supernatural. Most powerful is God or Almighty. So west wind has been given the equal status of the God by the poet Percy Shelley. Now he wants something else from the west wind. Let us see what he wants in the fourth stanza. Already we have understood first stanza is about on land, second stanza is about on air, third stanza is about on water. Now in the fourth stanza, he wanted to link himself with the west wind. He wanted to be as powerful as the west wind. Venkateshwar sir, can you read the fourth stanza? Goji. Gosh, ask.
Sir, in this third stanza, there is a line, the sapless foliage of the ocean. Actually, why the foliages are termed as sapless, though the foliages are in the immediate water? So why they are termed as sapless, sir?
What do you mean by sapless? Tell me.
Sapless means that kind of vegetation does not have any fluid actually.
Sapless, the leaves of the trees and plants at the bottom of the ocean seem devoid of the vital juice. When west wind arrives, these things might have lost their life, or because of fear they might have lost. So sapless, I didn't get you. What is actually the confusion here, Goji?
Sir, actually, it is mentioned that the sapless foliage, actually, in water, all the plants must have the sap, but why it is sapless?
Let me come out. I am also Googling. Sapless meaning correct, you are asking?
No, sir, I am asking, sir, why foliages are sapless, though the foliages, the green vegetations are immediate to water, but why they are termed as sapless, sir?
No, I am not getting your question. I might be tired. Anybody can help him? Sapless. Goji?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain what you mean actually in this line sapless means?
Sir, sapless means that does not have any fluid actually. It does not have any fluid. It is dry actually. That is sapless. So the foliages are termed as sapless. Means though these foliages are in the water, so why they are termed as sapless?
Okay, maybe because of the arrival of the west wind, those vegetation might have lost all the fluids in them. That's why maybe Shelly might have explained or expressed his idea that they have become sapless. Sapless is the fluid which circulates in the plants, correct? I also googled it now.
Yes.
So sapless means
Yes,
there
sir.
is no fluid or there is no whatever, like blood in that what do you call vegetation. Because of the fear or terror created by the west wind, they might have lost that one. I'll also, let me come back. Sapless, you are asking, correct? The
Yes,
leaves
sir.
of the trees and plants at the bottom of the ocean seem devoid of the vital juice. Because of the arrival of the west wind, they have lost the life. Or with this fear stricken, they might have lost that fluids. Any more questions,
Okay,
Goji?
sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Right. Others, any questions? If you have any questions, you ask me. If I don't know, I'll also Google, I'll also learn, I'll tell you.
So there is no PDF for Ode to the West Wind from Lit Chart, sir, because there means they give the meaning of each word and phrases, sir. So
I'll see that one. If I get, then I'll share with you, okay?
oh, okay.
Right. It means trying to win readers and ends and stand though here it means. Right. So shall we continue, Goji?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now in the fourth stanza, we will discuss how he want to link his life with the great power, the west wind. Now Goji, please read the fourth stanza.
Yes, sir. If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power, and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable. If I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then to outstrip the sky speed, a scarce seemed a vision I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed. One too like thee, tameless and swift and proud.
Right. So now you can see, if I were a dead leaf, thou mightiest bear. The west wind had made those dead leaves to remove or move from that place. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, he also wanted to be like a swift cloud with along with west wind can fly, and he wanted to be like a dead leaf. A wave to pant beneath thy bar and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou. So he wanted to be like west wind, or he wanted to join with west wind like a dead leaf or a swift cloud or a wave to pant beneath thy bar. He wants to be along with the west wind. Oh, uncontrollable. So he mentioned west wind like an uncontrollable. Nobody can have control over this west wind, like God. If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be that comrade of thy wandering over heaven, as then when to outstrip the sky's speed, scarce seemed a vision. He, even though he was young, or if he went into boyhood also, he could not match with the west wind, and he wanted to match with the west wind. I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Now he wanted to ask one favor from the west wind. What is that favor? Oh, lift me as a wave, leave a cloud, like the west wind had driven the dead leaves and the clouds and waves. I fall upon the thorns of life. Now he had have so many problems in his life, so many miseries, so many problems, so much trauma. So he wanted to be lifted away like a dead leaf by west wind. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed. One took like thee, tameless and swift and proud. He wanted to be like west wind. How is west wind here? It is tameless. Nobody, nothing can tame west wind, control west wind. And swift, it is very fast and quick, and proud. It is very strong in character. So like west wind, he wanted to be like that. The reason is he is not like west wind. That means he is depressed, is sad, and he was controlled by many people, and he was having the agony of life in the planet Earth. Now this stanza and the next contain the poet's prayer to the wild west wind. If he had been a dead leaf, a swift cloud, or a wave, he would have been happy. There would have been no need for him in his plight to appeal to the west wind if he had at least preserved the dreams and ideals of his boyhood, when it seemed possible to outstrip the speed of the west wind. His ideals have now been shattered. Worldly customs and conventions weighed down on one who is like the west wind, tameless and swift and proud. He has fallen on the thorns of life. He passionately appeals to the west wind to lift him as a wave, a leaf, a cloud, and save him from further agony. So once he was like a west wind, he lost his boyhood charm. He has lost all his courage and all those things when he had in boyhood. Now he is have sufferings. So he wanted west wind to lift him from all these problems. To generalize this part, when we were all in childhood, we were also like west wind, untamed, swift, proud, not having so any worries in our childhood. But now at this age, you can see so many problems, so many traumas, so many things are part of our life, and that made us to become weak in our life. So he wants to again go back into that state, and he wanted to enjoy his life like a west wind, tameless, swift and proud. Let us go to the last stanza. Diksha.
So, make my thy liar. So, is it
Make me thy
LYR?
liar. Make me thy liar.
Liar, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone. Sweet though in sadness, be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit, be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves, to quicken a new birth, and by the incantation of this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished heart, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. Be through my lips to awakened earth, the trumpet of a prophecy. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind?
Right. So he prays or requests the old west wind that make me thy lyre, even as a forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone. Sweet though in sadness, be thou, spirit fiery, my spirit, be thou me, impetuous one. He at least want to become some kind of instrument to join or to add to the west wind. Like the forest, the poet wishes to become a vehicle through which the wind can express itself. Does it matter if the leaves are also falling like the leaves of the forest? The poet calls on the fiery spirit of the west wind to inspire and drive his dead thoughts like the withered leaves to quicken a new birth. He wanted to reborn and with a new ideals or with the same set of ideals which he had expressed and enjoyed in his boyhood or childhood. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like a withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by incantation of these words, by speaking all these lines, scatter as from an unextinguished heart ashes and sparks, my words among mankind, be through my lips to unawakened earth. So he had so many problems, but still with this stanza or in this stanza through the west wind, he wants to leave a prophecy, or he wants to tell something to this coming generation, the trumpet of prophecy that, O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind. He is a very optimistic person. He ends this poem with an optimism that though he has so many problems, but a day will come, he will come out of all the problems and he will relive his life like a west wind. The poem concludes on a note of hope. Shelley's ideals may have been shattered, but he has not lost faith. He is sure that better times are in sight which would prove his dreams have not been in vain. So he wanted to live life like, again, relive life like west wind, untamed or tameless, swift and proud in his life. Now I can generalize this poem because Shelley had lost his ideals, has moved away from his idealistic life, and he had forgotten his ideals, his aim, his goals and all those things because of the burden of the life, and he had become weak and powerless. When he watched when he expressed the idea about the west wind on land and earth and air, he realized that he had become so weak because he had moved from his ideals. Now he wanted to again reborn, and he wanted to go with his ideals, and he wanted to manage and maintain and keep up his ideals so that he can relive his life like a west wind, tame, untamed, swift and pride and powerful in this nature. So in this entire poem, poets wants to convey one message, or poets wants to say that he wanted to live life like west wind. The power of west wind inspired him, and he also wanted to be as powerful as the west wind. The poem, though, does not seem political or social from any angle, yet some critics argue that there are certain elements in this poem that makes it social. Shelly talks about social change. The wind that sows the seeds, scatters the leaves, change the location of clouds are symbols that the poet uses for explanation into social change in his ode to the west wind. Thus, the poet shows that the society is moving towards destruction and portrays change as a law of nature. So this is about the poem Ode to West Wind, written by Percy Shelley. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Goji.
No, sir, I don't have any questions from this poem.
Diksha. Preeti?
No, sir, no question.
Preeti? Okay, right. So we'll go to the next poem. Just let me stop the recording, and again I'll start the recording again. Otherwise, it's okay.